The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and welcome to The People's View. I'm Carl Seidel. I'm a four-term representative, and I served on the Public Works Committee. One of my terms, I served as vice chairman. The other gentlemen we have here are...
Kevin Scully, a one-term rep living in Nashua, Ward 6. Children and Family Law.
Children and Family Law.
And I'm Don LeBrun, former vice chair of HHS for my entire career. Decided not to run last time, and now I'm serving on the Board of Medicine.
Very good, Don. Well, what we're doing now is we're going to have a discussion on what's happening up there in Concord. Lots of things are happening. Most of them, I think, are bad as far as I can see, but hopefully a couple of things will be handled. And Kevin, you want to start off with one of the items that you'd like to talk about?
Well, do you want to start with the budget or something a little more
No,
light?
That might take the whole term.
Yeah, it could. All right. Well, I thought it's kind of interesting. It's, how was a conservative born?
Right.
I guess is always a question. And there was a very funny article I saw, and it was a group called Campus Reform. And what this young man did was he went on to college campuses and he started asking the students about socialism. And most of the students he was interviewing, at least certainly the ones he had on there, were very much in favor of socialism, the idea of making those, rich, greedy bastards pay. And then he hit them with the question, well, how do you feel about sharing your grades? Taking a little bit off your GPA and giving it to the other students because some people just can't do quite as well as you. And boy, you want to talk about people pivoting on a dime. Because when suddenly something was actually going to be taken away from them, and a lot of them said, I worked very hard for those grades and I want to keep them. And God bless them, they should. So I'm just hoping that they can make that mental
I hope they realize
connection.
That's going to happen when they go out there working, that they're going to take a little bit more away from you.
Right, exactly. Which is, you worked hard, you got the grade, you worked hard, you finally get a good job, and then suddenly, so I'm hoping again they make the connection. But it is kind of interesting just to see it, and I thought it was rather humorous.
The other part that the socialism I think has that people don't realize is they want to have the government decide what is best for everybody. Mm-hmm. You lose freedom and you lose the choice. I don't see how anybody can like that. Whether somebody want to have their life governed for them forever by the government.
Look at this guy Yang. They want to give everybody $1,000 a month.
All right. How about that?
I saw an interview with him today, and I mean, the guy's dead serious. You got to give it to him, and he's intelligent.
Yeah.
But my golly, where did he come up with that idea?
And he doesn't really know how inflation gets affected by some of these actions.
Yeah.
I just came back from a trip down there in Africa, and I don't know if you know where Rhodesia used to be, but they went through about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. They had money that people were using, $50 million notes, $100 million notes.
Same way in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Same way.
That's Zimbabwe now as Rhodesia.
Well, yeah. When I was there, it was still Zimbabwe.
I brought some back for my grandkids.
Did you really?
Well, it's funny. I think sometimes we don't really, we're not able to say things in a very concise and pithy manner.
Right.
But I did hear one way of describing socialism, which I thought was wonderful. And it said, capitalism has unequal wealth. Socialism has equal misery.
Oh.
And that's the idea is, so they appeal to people's envy and greed. They destroy the wealth makers. And in the end, everybody is miserable alike.
If a guy works hard, he makes a fortune, he starts a business, he hires people, more power to him.
Right. That's what makes the thing go around,
That's
capitalism. Right. And people forget how much money is given to hospitals and universities and other medical type of institution. So
Right.
philanthropy is something monumental.
Absolutely.
And so they're sharing their wealth. You'll have a couple greedy SOBs that, hoard the stuff and nasty.
Well, we had a greedy golfer that didn't want to pay his caddy.
But I love that apocryphal story they had about the Puritans when they first got here. And they were basically communal, you could even say a communist society where everybody was supposed to share everything equally. And there just wasn't enough to go around. And I think the governor of the colony basically said, out of desperation said, I'm sorry, you're on your own. Here's your own little plot. God bless you. I hope you can make it, through and we'll all be here next year. And when everybody suddenly was responsible for themselves and they had their own basically private property, which they could work to better themselves and take care of their families, the colony suddenly started thriving.
Right.
Because now, again, it's like, if it's all on me, I better do something. And they did. And so there's that lesson. And it always amazes me how every generation seems to have to learn the same lessons over again.
It is surprising.
If everybody's on the same plane and there's no one to look up to, you become a stagnant society.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, it's the same thing in sports. You got to work hard to be successful.
Or you'll be the one sitting on the bench.
Or sitting out the side.
You may be on the
Cleaning
next
up the
plane
stadium
to
instead
nowhere.
of working in it, playing in it. But, hopefully our state reps will turn things around a little bit. But some of the things that are going on up there that they're asking for, what will be an income tax, capital gains tax, fees that are being increased, etc. After we had gone through years of reducing some of the things like that, the impediments.
Correcting the mistakes of the past, and now they're trying to make those same mistakes again.
Right.
Nothing will turn around as long as you have two parties fighting each other. Until those two parties come together and realize that both sides have good ideas, you just have to bring those ideas together. It's going to continue just the way it is. 2 years, everybody's going to repeal everything that happened 2 years before. The next group comes in, they're going to repeal everything. You can't march backward.
Well, again, I think 2020 for me is really going to tell a lot about has the character of New Hampshire permanently changed.
Yeah.
I do think that the election we had in 2018, a lot of it was, from my perspective, there was a lot of anger that drove this. I think the Democrats were successful in being able to tie the politicians at the local level to a man that obviously so many people dislike, which is Donald Trump. And they were able to basically bankroll that into a total change of government where they took the House and they took the Senate and the Executive Council too, for that matter. So now we're starting to see what the consequences of that wholesale change were. And as you said, we're trying to get an income tax, we're trying to roll back tax cuts for businesses, increase them, capital gains tax. Suddenly, a lot of the things that we were trying to fix and were fixing successfully are all under attack. So I'm interested in seeing whether the voters, seeing what's happening now, will make the same decisions and send those same people back. If they do, then New Hampshire, from my perspective, has changed. And, God bless the people. They're adults. If that's the way they want to go, that's the way. But I think
to
it's
move to North Dakota.
yeah, well, you got to start looking for the next
I might look
place.
for a different
But I moved here to get out of Massachusetts because I didn't want to live in the People's Republic. It's like, oh, God, it followed me, Go ahead.
But I've looked at a lot of the bills this year, and just at the sponsorship, you look at the sponsorship, it's either all Democrats or all Republicans. You can't pass a bill that way
No.
because the next year it's going to be repealed. Every single bill has got to be a mix of both sides to show that both sides are working together. You've got people that have committed themselves to that idea.
So I haven't looked at many bills and see who sponsored them. So that's what's happening.
Most of the health bills have like 10 Democrats and maybe 1 or 2 Republicans on. That's not a good mix.
No,
If you've got 10 people on the bill, you want 5 and 5.
Yeah.
You want to show that both sides agree this is a good idea.
Well, maybe that tells you something about whether the idea is good or not. If you can't get, party from both sides
Well,
to buy into
it's-
something, perhaps it isn't
It's
something
not
we should
always
be doing.
a matter of not being able to get. Anybody can go into OLS and sign on to a bill. You
Yeah,
don't have to be
yeah.
asked to.
Yeah.
You see a bill and you like a bill, you can go in and sign in
Sure,
on it.
I've done it several
Sure.
times. But we'll see what happens on that. But talking about some of the medical things, I guess we got to wait to see how the budget comes out. I mean, you're going to see Sununu's budget. You're going to see the Democrats' budget, which I guess they're going to talk next Tuesday about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm worried about one of the things they cut out is the psychiatric.
The SPU.
Yeah. Is that in a separate bill, or is it that just going to be eliminated
No, I think
from the budget?
it's on a separate bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is. Did you happen to notice how that was sponsored? Was it all one
No,
side?
that's one I didn't look at the sponsors on.
Okay. Because I'm concerned that ever since I got in there up 2008, we
But
were
it
looking
really
to
didn't
handle-
matter how that was sponsored. That wasn't countered by the sponsors. That was countered when it got to finance and they took it out of the budget.
Uh-huh.
So that was a different situation. Finance did that.
Well, that was by the partisan vote.
Yeah.
That's a terrible shame.
And
'Cause that's
I mean,
something
they've been
that's-
trying to do something for medical help, especially for the younger people. And now they have to go into the treatment center in the prison. That's where it is. I don't think people know that that's where there's.
Oh yeah, it's
is.
right at the state prison.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And sometimes they're actually in some ways able to interact with the general population. It's not that
Really?
it's totally separate. Sometimes they intermix.
Well, that's not a good idea.
It's not a good idea at all.
Oh my goodness.
And the staff at the prison is not what it is in a hospital.
Right.
And then I guess the people who are actually visiting the patients, family members, have to go through. Basically, they're treated as if their
They're going to-
loved one is an inmate,
Right.
and have to go through all the security
They have to
precautions,
go through-
including searches and everything else, just to go visit somebody that
That's
they love.
absolutely correct.
And that was one of the things that we were trying to fix. And I got to tell you, shame on the Democrats for killing that. That's something I thought everybody understood we needed.
And
I
what
don't
they
get that.
replaced it with isn't, going to work anyway.
No.
I mean, some of the things that they want to do. And
But there's also a counter to this. In 2015, we set up a new ward at the psychiatric hospital. The ward sat for 13 months empty, not because we didn't have people to beds for people that needed treatment, but because we couldn't get staff. We could not hire people to serve in that unit. That is really a serious job.
oh yeah,
It's a dangerous job.
yeah, definitely.
And we could not get people because they could walk across the street to a doctor's office and make more money
Yeah.
than we were willing to pay them.
So you think that was a hindrance in this new building then? I mean,
No,
they
I don't think that
In a
was given
new
a thought
building.
in this
Yeah.
new building.
Okay.
No, I don't
Well-
think that issue came up.
I'm a little bit worried to see how this all comes out because I don't know what they want to do with some of the Medicaid and all that sort of stuff. The family leave, that's another one that could be really inexpensive.
Yeah.
And
Well, family leave is one that I worked with Senator Feltus on, and we had a good bill to start with until the committee decided to make some amendments and just totally destroyed the bill.
oh no,
It was much more sustainable than what this current bill is. This bill is just not sustainable.
Oh, it'll be sustained all right, because once you put the income tax in place, they'll
you put the
just
tax
keep raising the income tax to sustain it, and we'll all be paying.
But they give all the power. They give all the power on it to the commissioner.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know, it's crazy.
He can do anything he wants with it and change anything he wants.
Is that
one person?
Is that even constitutional?
It hasn't been challenged yet. I don't know.
Yeah,
if
I
it's
know, to give
constitutional.
over the power of taxation from the legislature to an unelected individual. Crazy.
That-
I'm sure it would be challenged.
Yeah, well, I hope so because I think some of these things have gone on anyway, not to the extent of what this would lead to, but other things where Department of Safety, for example, raises penalties.
Yeah, they were given that
Yeah.
privilege.
Right. And we had to call, I know in 2010, we had to call a halt to them and make sure that, whenever they needed money, they slapped somebody. He said, oh, let's go see one of these small guys who can't fight with the lawyers and fine them $1,000 a day. For
It's always the small guy, isn't it?
Yeah, for having dust on the floor or something. But no, that's honestly some of the stories I heard. They pick on people that were self-employed or had maybe 2 or 3 people working for them.
And with the health bill, there's also not an opt-in, opt-out clause in there. Everybody's got to pay for it.
Right.
So
That's the thing.
It may be good for people to have a family, but say it's a single person. Say I'm a single person and I decide I don't want family medical leave. I can't opt out. I've got to pay for it anyway.
Right.
Which makes it a tax.
Well, some people don't need it. They have a good family to support them. I was fortunate enough.
And they have good medical insurance.
Yeah, and they had good,
Through their employer or
that
whatever.
I could take care of that all myself.
But I feel like we're almost making a mistake in terms of buying into the mindset that it's how it's paid for. So I'm not even saying that family medical leave is a bad idea.
No,
but
it's
when you
not a bad
tie
idea.
it to an income tax and you put into place the collection mechanism, put all the people into the state government and put that there, does any reasonable person think it's going to stop at 0.5% and only with paying for family medical leave?
Of course not.
They are going to jump on that.
It'll be 2 to 5% in no time.
And we'll be Massachusetts in 5 years. We cannot allow this to happen. Even if it's, if you agree with the idea of family medical leave, you cannot make it an involuntary, paid for with an involuntary income tax.
That's a big point in my mind. There's this involuntary movement. You have no choice at all whether you want to or not. And it's all one thing. Haven't we learned enough with Obamacare? One system doesn't fit everybody's needs. Please wake up and
Have
say,
you ever
look,
seen a program the government runs that has been successful?
No.
No, and you never will.
And it's a benefit. I don't even see the union saying that they want to have some negotiation. If you get a big benefit like that, maybe you don't get as big a raise in your pay. That's usually the bargaining that you do.
But the union's going to get a raise regardless.
Yeah, they'll get both.
They're going to get both. But in implementing this, you've got all that staff and everything to administer it.
Right.
And they're all going to be union people.
Yeah.
So the union's going to make out either way.
Well, I don't know. I don't see what we can do right now, but let's get the people riled up and contact their representatives.
Well, I think it is so important that we get better at getting the word out, because I'm just really not sure that folks understand what is being done ostensibly in their name up in Concord. And we have to make sure, again, at the end of the day, if everybody lines up and says, this is where we want to go now as a society, we want to impose that income tax, and we're just going to let them reach into our pockets and decide what to do with it, well, then I guess that's where New Hampshire is now. But I think most people really don't want that to happen, and I'm not sure they understand what is being attempted right now. And if we don't get the word out, it'll happen eventually and it'll be too late.
Well, I hope
If that happens, we have to do away with the live free part of our motto and just die.
Well, I hope our audience gets a little bit active and wants to say something and gets in the paper or gets call people or comes to the Republican meeting on the second Thursday of every month.
But do you want to talk about the budget now and what's being proposed for an increase? What is it? Is it 13, 14% increase that they're trying to put through right now?
Well, that's what they want.
My God.
Remember when they wanted to do that in 2010?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, again, built into our Republican Party platform, which I agree with, was the idea that the cost of government, the rate of increase should be no more than inflation plus population growth. I think that's an entirely reasonable, self-imposed restriction we put on ourselves to make sure that the size and cost of government doesn't spin out of control. What's the inflation right now? Maybe 2.5%, and the population growth. And we actually brought some people in, which is great. But I think it's under 0.5% population increase. So we're looking at 3%. The budget that's being proposed right now is 14% 15% more. Where does this take us? Where is it going to go? It's unsustainable growth and unsustainable cost.
But it's the attitude that we now have to set up a program, a good program this term, and next term automatically have a change of power and have people come in and say, we don't like that program anymore. 2 years, it's gone. 2 years forward, they come back and they want to set up a program again. Until the attitude in government changes and people start to work together and the public starts to demand their representatives work with each other, we're not going to get anything done. We're going to take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and that's going to continue. 10 years from now, we'll be sitting here saying the same thing.
Well, and I honor your thought and what you're trying to do, which is to get people work together. But from my perspective, if it's a bad idea, saying, well, we're only going to do half a bad idea, is still bad. It's a bad idea. So the question becomes then, is it a good idea or a bad idea? If it's a bad idea, I think we have to oppose it. I will not go halfway and say I'm going to do half a bad thing because it's better than.
But if an idea is bad, that's going to come out and surface within the debate between both sides. You're going to find it's a bad idea and eliminate it.
It's not
The
being
good
eliminated.
ideas will rise to the top.
The bad ideas are being voted through the House and the
Well,
Senate
I think
right
one
now.
of the parts that when
But
you have,
that's my point. Right now, you have 2 separate parties that are trying to fight each other in every way they possibly can. When people come together, they sort out whether an idea is a good idea or not. They amend it. They do whatever they have to. They either make it a good idea and it works, or they get rid of it. They eliminate it.
It's not working that way, Don. I mean, it's
It
being
isn't
pushed
working
through.
that way, and that's my point. It's got to work that way.
well, I think one of the ways.
The only way that works is if you have 2 parties that essentially agree on the same things.
No,
and we don't.
No,
Not
you don't have to
necessarily,
have 2
but,
parties to agree.
What you do need is, like we don't have here in Nashua anymore, we have complete Democrat control of all the representatives and the senators. And if we had at least sharing, I think we ran it much better when we had, maybe half and half or, 60-40 on the parties. I think that once you get complete one way, nobody talks
That's
about
a bad
anything
situation,
else.
yes. But
That's
when
the
you're
worst
talking
thing.
about 400 people in a House, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get 400 Democrats or 400 Republicans.
No,
But
but
as long as you have the 2 parties, I don't care what the margin is. If they sit down and work together and thrash out each other's ideas and come to a conclusion, whether it's a good idea or not, they can pass it together.
I agree from one thing, Don. I think New Hampshire does have the ability to do that. Whether they can or not depends on who they elect. I think we have to be more.
It's not only New Hampshire.
We're doing that right now, though. I mean, the consent calendar is basically all of the bills that we agreed to as the 2 parties and said, we think these are good ideas. And it still might be 50 or 60% of the bills that are going through the House, correct? And the Senate.
Then that's,
So it is happening, but there are
for the
certain
most part,
things.
that's the case.
There are certain things where there is profound philosophical differences. And on those, I must respectfully say, I will say, heck no. I don't want to compromise because it goes against my profound political philosophy in terms of how government ought to operate. And so there should be disagreement, and it's up to the people to decide who they want to put in the majority in those cases to decide which way
Absolutely.
this
That's what elections
society
are
is going to
for.
go.
I think the discussion in the meetings and in the different committee meetings that we have should be brought out a little bit more. People should be able to see what their representatives are saying in those meetings. They don't get to see that. What do you think about having those things videotaped?
I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about that, whether it's absolutely necessary or not.
Well, how do you know what your representative is saying?
Well, you don't unless you're asking that person or that person's taking the time to make their positions known to their constituents. I mean, at the Senate level, there does seem to be much more of the
There's
emphasis.
only 24 of them. That's
And that's part of the issue.
If you want to get reelected, you're going to make sure that your constituents are up to date on what you're doing and what you're doing to represent them. So you don't need live streaming to do that. You do that in the community where you get elected.
Of course, you get the opportunity to pitch the way you want to present yourself to the world, which is not necessarily exactly how
I
you're
don't know.
doing things yourself.
I don't know how receptive our people, our voters are to something like that. They don't. They listen to what's on the TV or the newspaper.
Well, that's
or
the
whatever.
biggest mistake.
Yeah, well, I agree. They don't get a good picture that way. That's the only reason I suggest that maybe having some of this stuff live that comes on educational TV or something like that.
Well, I mean, you have to admit from a logistical standpoint, it's going to be pretty tough. If you have 20 standing committees, all hearing all of their bills, which person who's out there working for a living and, trying to make a buck to make ends meet has time to go into that level of detail in terms of what's happening? I would love to see the newspapers publishing roll call lists in terms of all of the votes. I mean, they're always looking for content.
But that is published.
Is it
it's not published in the newspaper, maybe, but anyone can go on New Hampshire General Court and look up every single vote.
You see what our voters here in Nashua, they are a solid block.
Oh, yeah.
They are a solid
Well, they're
block.
wearing a little sign that says 27 strong.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a little pin. Yeah, 27 idiots.
Well, I am always amazed, though. It is interesting when you look at the distribution of voting in the Republican Party. You have it's fairly diverse in terms of where people stand. On the Democrat side, it's amazing. It's almost a straight line in terms of that. God bless them. You have to say as in terms of a voting bloc, they are almost entirely and uniformly the same all the time, every single one of them. And there's some real strength in that, but I also look at that and say, how many independent thinkers are there in that party?
I don't know.
Okay, tell me if you agree with this. The worst thing that happens in the legislature, number one is caucuses. Number two is the white sheet. Number two is the pink sheet. Number three is the green sheet. And whatever color...
Yellow.
The yellow sheet, yellow sheet. That's the worst thing that happens. If you could eliminate those things, people would have to work together. But you go into a caucus, you've got somebody standing up there telling you, this is the way you should vote. This is what we want. This is how you should vote. There's no excuse. You don't have any say in it. Just go and vote the way we tell you. The same thing on the other side. Everybody comes in with a sheet telling them how to vote.
Well, I think it actually speaks something to how...
That's not free representation.
Well, something, it is good to have other people, you obviously, I know you were on a heck of a lot of committees. I'm really amazed.
I was on 18 committees, and I served on all 18 of them.
And God bless you.
And I worked for my entire time across the aisle.
Yeah.
Medicaid expansion is the absolute proof. 52,233 people kept insurance because I busted my butt to get Medicaid expansion passed against the will of the Republican Party.
I guess what I'm trying to say is we wouldn't have so many voting sheets if the Republican leadership aligned a little more closely with the Republican platform. Because if we did, then everybody would be coming together, I think, underneath that. The problem for me is I think that too often the Republican Party said that's just a loose collection of ideas that can be ignored for political expediency. I happen to think that it was a wonderful social compact that we put together, and that was a promise we made to the people who voted for us, that if you elect me, I will follow this platform. Wow. And I did for the most part. I think it's just a shame that so often I felt, at least in the term I served, the leadership up there wasn't reading it or just said, that's just some suggestions. We're going to do what we want to do. And I think it got us into trouble.
Well, what do you think about the leadership now and outside of our legislature? I don't talk about that because it's the same leadership that we've had for the last couple of years.
The leadership on both sides is atrocious.
Yeah.
There's no real expertise in leadership in the House this year or in the Senate. None.
Well, I mean, we have the same people there, right? In terms of, so they are all long-serving members of the House who, in terms of Dick Hinch or Chuck Morse, who were there. Now, the question is whether they're being effective or not is another question. I mean, at the state level, it's interesting. We have, Steve Stefanik, and then we now have Pam Tucker. I think for the first time in history, at least as far as I know, they are actually two former members of the House Republican Alliance,
right,
which was, from my perspective, the group I most closely aligned with. So I was actually rather excited about that idea to feel like we had people I consider to be fairly conservative for the first time running the state apparatus. So I gotta tell you, I was a little happy about that.
So you think they may be a little bit better at going out and getting other conservative people to run for office?
I hope so. That would be wonderful, and we could get a little more unified in terms of our approach and our methods. Don, you've been up there. You were up there a lot longer than I have. You've seen a lot of things come and go. I can only speak from my limited perspective of the one term, but I must tell you, there were some days I went home and I was despondent and heartbroken because there were things I felt were just so obvious in terms of aligning with the Republican platform, like the pro-life issue. And to have, to lose post-viability abortion by 4 votes and having 30 Republicans vote against the party platform that says we're a pro-life, it was devastating to me. And I, so I'm kind of happy with the idea that we're starting to get, maybe even though we're the minority party right now, getting people that again, from my personal selfish perspective, aligned more with the conservative, the Republican platform. And I'm hoping that will result in getting people, that they can recruit people who will think that way, because I do think it's the superior approach to ordering our society.
Well, one of the things they're trying to do is to organize the town committees much better. They have, I guess, awakened a few of those towns, so they do have some new ones, but they still have to increase it quite a bit. Do you think a town committee will be effective in getting people with the people who are wanting the Republican platform to run?
I'll defer to the elder statesman here in terms of that.
No, I was having, while he was saying that, I was having another thought, and that was about party platforms. It's all well and good to have a party platform, but party platforms separate each other. The one side has one idea, the other side has the other idea, and we're going to clash in the middle. And that's not the way to do it. You don't want to clash in the middle. You want to take your ideas and their ideas and bring those ideas together and try to reason with them. There are some things you'll never reason on, like you said about the abortion thing and whatnot. You'll never reach an agreement on that. But there's so much else that you can, the things that matter to the entire population of the state, you can reason with people and come together and pass good legislation. Right now, we're not passing any good legislation.
No.
Because we're fighting each other. It's stupid.
Well, I'm still hoping some good legislation will go through. Again, the things that we agreed with on the consent calendar, I think they're going to go on the governor's desk. The governor will sign them. Some of the bigger issues, again, where we have profound philosophical differences, I'm hoping he's going to say no, quite honestly, because I think they're bad ideas. So I'm hoping what should be passed will be passed and signed by the governor. And from, again, my perspective, what should not be passed, he's going to say, heck no, and we're not going to allow that to happen.
And then what happens?
The governor has come out and made the statement that he has a box full of red pens. So if that doesn't tell you something, nothing will.
No, I guess the odds of being successful and getting a budget by the end of June aren't very high.
No.
Well, I mean, if the worst comes to the worst is we stay with the budget at the levels we have right now. We deferred
to the previous
which was
budget.
A pretty big increase, from the,
that's
2 years
what
before.
Bugs me, is that we have these big excesses and surpluses of millions of dollars. And now they want to cut raise the business tax again. You're not going to have any excess. They're going to. You're saying, oh well, the government's taking that 0.5% that I can't use to expand my business.
Right. Again, I think raising the business taxes are a terrible idea. I don't understand why they cannot understand that if you basically encourage human nature, say that we're going to let you keep what you make,
Right.
most of it, people are going to try harder and they're going to go out and they'll work to make more money. And in terms of the total amount of dollars that are being brought in, it's more than if you start to impose draconian taxes and people just say, you know something, I'm not going to get out of bed because you're taking 60% of what I'm making.
Right.
It's like, I can get by on this. I'm not working any harder because you're taking the most of it from me. It's a terrible idea. And I mean, we're not at 60% in New Hampshire, but we're trying to take more from people who are the guys who are actually the wealth makers and the people who create the jobs that we need so much for
Look what's happening with the business education scholarship program. They want to repeal that. Why? It's a productive program. You don't want to repeal, but that's a program that I think if two sides had really come together, which never happened, it was strictly, this is what we're going to do. We're going to repeal it. We're in the majority. Doesn't matter what you think. If two sides would have come together, you would still have that program. I firmly believe that.
Well, how do we get them together?
How do we get them together? Individually. You reach out when you promote a bill, when you sponsor a bill, you don't just reach out to your friends and those that sit in the caucus with you. You reach out to people on the other side that you know fairly well, and you talk to them and you convince them to sign on to your bill. That way, they have signed on to it because they think it's a good idea. They haven't just gone in and decided, well, here I am, I'm representing so-and-so, and I'm going to sign on to 33 bills this year, and I don't have any idea what the hell any of them are about, but I'm going to sign on to them because I want my name on those bills.
Yeah.
Well, Don, how do you reconcile that with the fact that when you actually look at the voting records, again, in the Democrat Party, 98% of those people are voting exactly the same way all the time? It doesn't seem like you're able to reach across the aisle and get folks to vote.
Let's go back to what I said about the caucuses. When you go into a caucus and you're told, look, this is the way we want you to vote, and if you don't vote that way, we're going to take your chairmanship away from you, we're going to take this away from you, we're going to, in some way, we're going to penalize you for not voting the way we told you. What kind of legislature is that?
No, I don't know. But what can we do here in Nashua? How do we get the people to understand what we're trying to get across and our idea of what good government is?
Oh, what a question.
We're going to solve the problem of the world now. Come on.
Nashua, there's two Nashuas to start with. You've got your inner city Nashua, and you've got your outskirts. Of course, your inner city, as far as population goes, is much higher in the inner city than it is in the outskirts. And that's the way it's going to be for a long time until people realize that all these programs that the inner city is passing, benefiting the inner city and not helping the outskirts, they're going to have to realize that we've got to do something about this. We've got to educate people, have people understand that everything is being centered within the inner city and nothing's being done in the outskirts.
What would you like to see done in the outskirts?
I would like to see a blend. I would like to see the highway not be a dividing point.
Yeah.
I would like to see a blend of individuals. Right now, people in the outskirts, all the way around Nashua, are not even going downtown.
Right.
They have no need to go downtown. They don't want to go downtown. There's nothing down there for them.
But the mayor seems to think that the Arts Center and a few other things like that are going to bring people downtown.
The mayor is focused on the inner city.
Yeah.
He does not have one iota of concern about anything other than the inner city where he lives.
You know, you've struck on something very, very interesting, and that I read an article my sister sent me, and it was called The Curley Effect. James Michael Curley, and you may be familiar with him. He was the mayor of Boston. And so he was, this Irishman who was elected to become the mayor. And what he did was he purposely created policies which hurt the Brahmins, the established, rich folks in Boston, and he ended up driving them out of Boston. And what it did was it actually hurt the city in general because the overall wealth of the city went down, but he benefited himself because he increased his base of people who were voting for him and made them even more dependent upon the government that he was running. So he did things which benefited him at the expense of the city. And you can see, I think, that happening in a lot of other places as well, where you get these folks in there who create their little political fiefdoms, and in doing so, they are actually hurting the city that they are ostensibly supposed to be running and
Well,
helping.
that's the whole
exactly
reason
what's
they
gonna
want
happen
all
in
these
Nashville.
illegal immigrants in here, isn't it?
Well, it's a shame because I have to say, some of they talked about and they were touting this whole issue of, of creating low-income housing. And it's funny, my son said, "Oh, I think that's a great idea." And I asked him, I said, why are we paying people to live here? Because again, when you do that, when you start creating low-income housing, you were actually subsidizing or paying, literally paying for people to live here. So nobody's paying us to live here. Why is that such a good idea when those folks are going to need more of the benefits? They're going to be in the school systems. They're not covering, what the cost of the education, but will be covering the cost of education that they're going to have. And God bless, I want everybody, I don't care what race you are, what religion, what creed, or anything else. The only thing I want from another guy or woman or wherever is cover your own nut. Pay for yourself, and God bless you. You're welcome here as far as
Be responsible for yourself.
You have just as much right to be here as I do.
Absolutely.
As soon as you start saying, well, we're going to have these people come in and you're going to have to pay for them, now I have some say in this.
That goes back to the share the wealth.
So I guess the folks, the city of Nashua is going to have to say, I want to be a welcoming community. I want to welcome responsible adults who can basically take care of themselves.
Right.
I don't want to be a welcoming community of folks who are basically come in here and suddenly become, the public burden, which hurts, the good people. They'll end up saying, okay, this is crazy, I'm leaving. And we'll get into that downward spiral again where we're going to have an unsustainable government. And suddenly everybody's, reaching their hand out and Nashua becomes an economic basket case, and suddenly the state has to take care of them now because of the bad decisions that were made. So I'm not sure how we get around this, except that people have to start putting two and two together, saying, if we do this, this is going to happen, and it's going to hurt us economically.
Australia has an interesting system. An immigrant comes into Australia, they're given 6 months to speak English, enough English to get by, and get themselves situated. The state takes care of them, sets them up, gives them whatever they need, takes care of their needs. But they've got 6 months. If after 6 months they can't comply with the rules, they're given 30-day extension. If after those 30 days they can't comply, they're asked to leave the country.
Do they force them to leave?
Oh, yes.
Well,
Oh, yes.
let's see if somebody present that here. Because that'd be interesting. I agree with you because
the point is, it gives those people an incentive.
I agree.
They know they have to meet a goal.
I agree.
They come here and they don't have to meet anything. They can come here and stay on the dole forever if they want to.
No, I agree with you, Don.
It's a broken system.
Yeah. I think that we ought to do this. It isn't fair to the kids that are in school, too, when English isn't their language. They should have an intense language training before they go into school.
31 languages spoken in the schools in this city.
Right.
31 languages.
So that's something that maybe we ought to look at from our Board of Education, which is probably non-functional right now.
It's
Non-functional, dysfunctional, despicable.
I don't know.
I mean, to me, I'm beginning to dread those words. It's for the children, because that always means open up your pocket and give us some more.
But then you go over to the charter schools, who are two of them in Nashua are doing an excellent job and being recognized nationally.
One is number 4 and one is number 13.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry, number 34.
Wow. So if they can do it on less money than what we're paying. And the Board of Education always wants to give them more money than anybody else in the town. I don't see that at all. Again, we have to make sure that we have people on the Board of Education that are boards that do something and control the superintendent, not the other way around.
There's no public school in Nashua in the top 100.
Right.
And not only that, the charter schools can educate a student for $6,500 a year. It costs us almost $15,000 to educate that same child in a public school.
Yeah.
And we're not turning out a product.
Yeah.
What are we getting out of it?
Right.
Most of the graduates from our public schools need remedial training before they can enter college.
Right.
They're not prepared.
And there was an amazing statistic I saw in terms of, the student loan defaults. I believe it's over 60% of the student loan defaults are from students who came in and had to take remedial courses because they were not prepared to go to school.
Right.
And so what happens is there is this terrible industry where they're happy to lend those kids the money. The colleges are happy to take it because it's the loans that come in and suddenly they have the use of the bucks.
The college doesn't have to pay it back.
Yeah, the kids don't have to, aren't ready. They drop out, and suddenly they're burdened with these loans that can't be discharged in bankruptcy, and they're financially ruined. So you've got this system here where a lot of people are benefiting, and the ones that really don't seem to be benefiting are the actual students themselves.
Right. That's right.
And we got to figure out how to do this in a different way, because throwing more money at the problem is obviously not working.
And what's the matter with the other side of that situation? Why not go to a college you can afford?
Right.
Why do you have to go to Harvard or LSU or USC or whatever when you're not prepared? Why not go to a college you can afford? What's the matter with a community college, a trade school?
But they don't even get to do good work in the community colleges. I think that's what you're saying.
Which proves they're going to the colleges they shouldn't be going to.
Well, what college
Well, at
they
least
get?
that's a heck of a lot less of a, of a debt to incur.
Oh, that's true.
It's funny. The community college way is really the smart way to do it now, because it's funny. My brother was looking
I'm proud of my community college education.
Oh, no, it's the smart way to do it, because if you go there and spend your first 2 years there and take care of all the core requirements, it's really amazing. You could actually get into schools you could never get into as a freshman, as a junior, because a lot of people have dropped out of those schools that were let in there, and then they suddenly have empty seats.
That's true.
And you can walk in there and you can even get some scholarships to go to a school you never would have get into as a freshman. And when you graduate 2 years later, that school's name is going to be on your diploma.
Yes.
I think it's a wonderful way to do it.
It's a way to do it, especially if you have some weaknesses, because it gets those kids that don't have the self-control to do what they have to do in college. It's a big change. I don't think people realize how big it is.
I think a lot's got to do with the curricula in your schools nowadays.
Well, that too, but I mean, for the student, it depends on what their high school was. I mean, if some of these high schools just push you right through and they don't demand what they do in college. I know one of my children found out the hard way.
Well, it goes back to what Kevin started off by saying about sharing the grades.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is nowadays. You can't embarrass one child over another.
Isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
Well, it is terrible, because at some point things seem to have flipped, where they're more concerned with the one problem child than the 29 kids who are also in that and trying to get an education and trying to get ahead. And we have to figure out a way to deal with the issue. And I feel so awful for any child that runs into serious problems. But rather than making 29 suffer for the one, we have to figure out a way to reestablish discipline and goals, and this whole idea of we can't actually honor achievement because it's going to make somebody else feel bad.
That's terrible.
It's nuts. It's very pernicious in terms of that attitude.
That's not the real world out there.
No.
And that's the thing that I'm saying is a shock to so many kids. They don't believe. You can tell them all until they actually meet that They don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good point too, because
They
it
get
is a
out into
hard
the real world.
It's a hard world, and when you have just coddled them all the way through, and they suddenly get out into a competitive situation where people don't care what your feelings are, they want the bottom line and whether you can do it or not. It's got to be a terrible shock.
It is.
For them, and so we've done them no favors.
No, not at all.
No.
No.
But,
In fact, we've done them a good deal of harm.
I agree.
well, what's going to come up in this? We have elections here in Nashua in the fall. We're going to have new aldermen, new Board of Education, and a couple other things to elect. And then next year is the big year, 2020. People are getting started already. The training people how to run for election. Is there anything that you think is necessary or you'd like to see happen?
Well, that brings us into something that we were talking about before the show, and that's the fact that our buddy Steve Negrin is
That's right.
committed to running for Congress again.
Again. And I think he did a darn good job without any support.
Did
from
an
people.
excellent job with no support from the state.
And I think this city ought to understand that he is a very fair person, and he would be a star representative of the overall feeling for this city.
Steve is
And,
the kind of guy that will work with both sides of
Right.
the aisle, and
he
showed that he would.
Yeah, he would.
And,
I mean,
that's my kind of person.
He's a
Right.
good man. He's a fair man. He'll tell you straight up who he is and what he's thinking. And he's, from my perspective, I think that's wonderful.
And he
He's the
has
real
those
deal.
certain convictions that you were talking about that
Right.
he's not going to
Right.
give in on.
Yeah.
Right.
But other things, good things for the mass of the population, he will work together.
He did, like Kevin, did a lot for first year representatives up there during the last term.
Yeah.
Oh, he was, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And the good news is, from my perspective, I think he's on the radar screen
Yeah.
now. I think people have seen him.
Right.
I sure liked what I saw. And I'm hoping that.
Well, he
this
made a
next go
good
around-
point. Everybody who's run the last several years for that position, they only ran once. After they got,
Right.
they didn't make it, they just gave up. But now
he
I
made
think
an
he has
extremely good showing with
He
not
did.
having any support except from
44%, I
those
think it was.
constituents that wanted to support him.
And
the
no
state
money
shunned
for-
him completely.
Yeah, and there's no money for advertising, so
Yeah.
I think maybe what we can do, I know I will have some kind of a house thing for him because he needs to raise the money to compete. Because she was able to get a lot of money from the West Coast.
A lot of out-of-state money.
Oh, like
lot of-
90-some
yeah.
percent.
She had more money going in than he ever raised.
Right.
Right. I mean, I'm still a little miffed at our national Republican Party in terms of them. It's like they ignored that and they say, well, he doesn't look like he can win, so we're not going to try. And my God, we're a small state. It wouldn't take a heck of a lot of money to let him get his message level elevated, and again, I think the more people know him and hear from him, the more they're going to like him. I just hope somebody down there is saying, let's do something
Well,
to help
I
this guy.
think I'm hearing
It'll be a
that
travesty
you
if
will,
the state
yeah.
doesn't back him this time.
Well, I think he'll get more backing, but is it going to be enough? Because the Republican Party still is not raising as much money as the other people.
And she still had a good-sized war chest left after
yeah.
the election.
Right.
Well, I still think that we're still thinking, the old saying about, armies, generals trained for the last war. I still think there's too much of an emphasis right now on raising money and not enough emphasis on getting better at using social media.
Yeah,
Because
I agree
the
with you.
cost of social media on it is next to nothing. When
Or
you think about it, when you get on there and you get your 800 Facebook friends and you say something, you literally cost you nothing to type that into the typewriter and 800 people see what you're
Well,
saying.
I guess I'm old school, but I still believe that elections are bought.
I think it has to be a balance. But yeah, to say strictly we're going to buy, money and buy commercials, I think is really, we're going to lose again. So we need to get, and I'm not the guy with these answers. I just recognize.
But this is one of the
You
ways
need a
of
blend of
getting it
both.
out, I think. This is a free way of getting our message to the people. Now we got to get people to look at this. So everybody, please get your neighbor to look at the people's view.
Tell 5 people a day about the
That's
people's
right.
view.
Right.
Every day, tell 5 people about the people's view.
It's on YouTube and as well as the local channel 96.
No, are we like Facebook Live right now?
Not Facebook.
Okay,
on YouTube.
YouTube.
On YouTube, so YouTube Live right now,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. All right, so I'll have to start getting that word out because we know everybody wants to drop whatever they're doing to watch us, right?
But I think this is a way we can get our opinions out and use the experience of the eight of us, I think now that have experience up there in Concord, because it is something new. And there are a number of people, I'm sure, that can do a darn good job if they only have the door opened a little bit for them and
Right.
a little bit of support.
And we have to encourage people. And, as you know, it doesn't pay a hell of a lot, and it takes a lot of time. But I honestly can't think of anything that would be a better service you could do for your neighbors than to go up
That's
there
right.
and try to, govern well, effectively, and morally. I think, I met some great people, including the two of you going up there. I tell you, it just opened up a whole new world to me.
It did.
And I think it was wonderful. I'm
Listen,
very happy for
very good people that are trying hard, and I think it's a hard job to do, really. But it's not that. It's pleasant. It's when you succeed, it's very pleasing, I think.
But also, keep up to date on what your representative is doing.
Right.
And if they're not doing what you elected them to do, not that they're going to agree with you every time,
Right.
but if basically they're not doing what they told you they stand for, then get rid of them.
You can look on the website for the government to see how all these pieces of legislation have been voted on.
You can see the entire
If they
status of the bill as it goes through,
right, you can see the bill and you can see how your candidates
how your representative voted. Yeah.
Right, so you can go to that person's particular
yeah.
web page, right, and look at their voting record to
Absolutely.
see. Now, you need to have a little background to understand what those bills were, but the big ones, I mean, if you take out like
you
the
can
All you
read
have to
them.
do is click on it,
Yeah, and they
and
read
the
whole,
bill will come up.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll come up in a PDF file. You click on the PDF file, and it gives you the entire bill, and you can compare what your representative did to what the bill does.
And there's a history that goes along with it, so they can see what committees handled it, and
Yeah. You can see how many times your representative chickened out and walked out. I'm sorry,
No,
but I don't believe in a representative ever getting up and walking out in order not to
it's
vote.
interesting to see that because I'm looking at the records for Nashua ones.
50, 60 representatives, every vote, get up and walk
I don't
out.
look at the whole vote. I was just looking at the candidates, and every once in a while you see two or three of them all of a sudden didn't vote.
Yeah, that's like in Washington voting present
Right.
instead of voting yes or no.
Right.
Commit yourself. Vote yes or no. Take a stand.
Okay. Well, we're going to commit ourselves to another one of these meetings. These happened once a week now, and we'll continue as long as people are interested in doing this. So please tune in and get your neighbors to tune in. And thank you very
Carl.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.